Okay, Shay, I'd say we're ready to get started. So first and foremost, thank you everyone who is on. Thank you all for joining us. We've got a lot of information to share. You know, our entire forecast has a lot of content and a lot of product and place spotlights and things that can be certainly dug into deeper for everyone. And so what Shay and I have tried to curate today are sort of the big topics. And so that we can at least introduce you to the bulk of the forecast. But there's a lot more that's not being shared. So if you know, if you have the time to look a little further beyond today, there still is a lot of great content within the forecast. So, you know, big picture, Shay, I think you could go ahead and start the. And I'm not sure, Shay, if it's in presentation view or not yet. I guess maybe it is.
Yes. Yep, this is how we have to share it for working on one screen today. So.
Okay, perfect. Okay, cool. So just to give you guys a rundown of all the main topics we're going to be covering, we're going to be looking first at this notion of conscious design and this conscious consumer segment that that clearly is evidently concerned about conscious design. And so we've identified, you know, what we believe are like the 6 main areas of focus or values, if you will, for conscious design. And so the first is human connection, then purpose and purposeful brands, then wellness, healthy spaces, green design, and then authenticity. And then the second half of the webinar, we're going to look at just major macro movements, kind of those like big prevailing trends that we're seeing in the market that are eventually going to be and will continue to influence how we build and develop and design going forward. And so those major macro movements we're going to look at are the connected age, redefining home, old world skills, and then return to travel and open air. So just kind of, you know, in sort of a summary, you know, Shay and the team, we've spent a lot of time researching over the last, I think it's been 3 or 4 months since our last forecast, and so much has transpired. But in general, you know, what we're focusing on and seeing is just this sense of, you know, moving really into a new era that seems to be less about showy design and more about substance and purposeful design. We just, you know, when you think about everything that's happening around us and everything that continues to sort of unfold, it just doesn't feel like the time or era for frivolous design, just more purposeful design. And, you know, none of us know how, you know, long lasting some of these sentiments will be, but our instincts are that this is here to stay. You know, we've seen a lot of research out there about this sense of like kind of a great casualization period. You know, everybody's gotten really comfortable being comfortable. And so we want our communities and our indoor and interior environments and our brands to feel comfortable and welcoming as well. So, and there's obviously, as you all know, been so much focus, hyper focus on well and healthy spaces and healthy lifestyles and how we can build for that, how we can actually build for it. And so for this reason, we've dedicated this volume of our forecast and research all around conscious design. And conscious design that drives human connection, the healthy built environment, well lifestyles, and true authenticity. You know, we believe that as designers and developers, it's our role to design and to build with heart, consciously, and to truly bring forward community-driven placemaking. And so Shay is going to just give us just a quick run through of the 6 conscious design values, and then we'll be breaking each of these down.
Thanks, Jen. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. So like Jen said, I will read through these quickly to give us an overview, but we'll be breaking down each of these 6 design values as we go through our presentation. So we'll be taking a look at human connection here in just a minute. And then later on in the presentation, we'll take a look at purpose, wellness, healthy spaces, green design, and authenticity. So for our first section here, human connection, we really thought a lot about us as humans. We know that we're social beings. We know the importance of community, and that's something that we try to bring to all of our projects. But we're really thinking about community and how these relationships are so important for us as humans, for happiness, for progress. And we write it down right here, but people need people. So we're looking at ways to continue to design for these close-knit communities.
Yeah, the human connection piece, has always been at the heart and spirit of multifamily living and community design. But I think one of the biggest messages that we want to make sure we get across here today is we want to make sure that in sort of a hyper kind of short-term view reaction to COVID, that we're not compartmentalizing and parsing our spaces up too much. So, we just really want to make sure that we're thinking ahead and thinking long term, where, again, the spirit of multifamily living is always going to be about bringing people together. And so, one programmatic idea that we really want to make sure we're continuing to pursue and to push is, the notion of these like assembly and event type spaces. That can be programmed for all different types of events, wellness events, speakers, educational events, maker events, ways to bring people together and continue to, foster that connectivity between people and communities.
So one spotlight that we have here of a company that's doing this is Apartment Life. I'm sure many on this call are familiar with them. But we've heard from so many people that, especially during this time of COVID, that they've been one of the most crucial partnerships to getting through this time. So that kind of testimony had us taking a closer look at it again and looking at all of the ways that this organization is really helping to truly build these strong communities. If anybody has a chance, I recommend going to their website, reading through some of their testimonials from the residents. They're actually really, really moving about how much they've impacted people's lives. And they have a lot of great programming that we've looked at as well. So our next section here that we're going to take a look at, purpose. We talked a lot with the team, and Jen and I talked a lot about people wanting to feel good about where they live. And we've seen this through so many brands. You'll see all of the new brands popping up have an organization that they support, or you buy something and something is donated to someone in need. You're all familiar with these kinds of companies. But we were thinking about how to apply this for multifamily, and we were thinking about a lot of our residents sharing that value of being so time poor. And so we're thinking of creating a purpose through where you live that gives an opportunity to do good and give back just by making the choice to live in a certain community.
And there's ways that our developers can have a purposeful initiative as a company, but then I think following this, Shay is going to share some examples of how a community can also adopt some of those purposeful values. We just wanted to highlight Crescent Communities. We think they do such a great job with this initiative of Tree for a Key, and just this is sort of an example of how a developer can adopt a purposeful brand and a brand purpose that really, we believe people will connect with, and it resonates, and it just shows purpose. Thanks, Shay.
Thanks. And then what Jen was referencing earlier is we found this Oakview Apartments. We were really inspired by some of it seems to be an annual event that they hold. They call it a community day, and it's sort of like a giant block party where they're giving back to their residents through having these bouncy houses and all of those kind of block party activities, music and food. But they also open it up to the general community as well, so it's not just for residents. We were really inspired by this way to really engage with not only the residents, but engaging the residents with the greater community.
And another concept or way that a community could have sort of a give back greater purpose initiative would maybe be to commit one unit or the equivalent of a unit to a community driven space. that could be more greater community facing, could be a dedicated space for, an after school program or an artist in residence, or some way that sort of ties back to, being closely knit into the greater community. And there are some programs too, I believe it's through either Medicare or Medicaid, that there is a tax credit available for having this type of community space for an after school program. So there could be some ways that, could help finance this. And so next design value, which seems pretty apparent with conscious design, is wellness. This has been sort of, an incredibly important topic of late. And, the entire industry has been trying to, get their arms around how do we really design well spaces. And so just a couple stats here that I think are really important to, help us remember, why this is super important and why our target audience cares. But there's some, very important statistics, that evidence that, 53% of millennials say that wellness is important, and Gen Z is expected to surpass this. We manage stress and we socialize through the lens of well-being. Wellness encompasses really these three components: mind, body, and spirit. And okay, you're
Jenn.
Yeah.
So one place that Jenn and I have both looked at a few times that we're really inspired by is Sacred Space Miami. And this is a wellness and sort of an event space located in Miami. A beautiful design, so that makes us like it as well. But they are really known for their huge programming menu. So they have indoor and outdoor event spaces. They have a restaurant, they have a farm. So they have many areas and zones within their space to host events. And we're really inspired by this because we're thinking that designing or programming an event space that would allow a community to bring in and host this kind of programming would just be something that's so engaging. And we put it in this section because we're thinking it would be so great to have it geared toward wellness, but really it could be for any kind of event or programming or a speaker.
I think it's also just great inspiration for, always looking for these retail partnerships for some of our ground floor retail space. It's also a great place to kind of mine for really, really awesome programming ideas as to how to program some of our event spaces and, even some of our flex fitness spaces. There's a lot of great ideas. They're doing some really creative work.
Yeah, it's really cool. Yeah, thanks, Jenn. So something else we've looked a lot into recently is fresh vending. So we know that this is something within wellness and within some of the wellness certifications as well, which we will touch on later in the presentation. So we've looked at a few. Our challenge here is always finding someone that is nationally available. We can always see if there's someone in each city we're working in, but one company that we've looked at is Bite Fresh Vending. So they are a national distributor, and then it's possible to partner with someone local within your region. So that's kind of a nice way of getting the best of both worlds there with fresh vending. And then another option that we looked at is Sally the Robot. They're actually using this quite a bit in hospitals and like the hospital cafeteria. And this machine is cool because Bite, you can see what you're getting and you grab it. With Sally, it's actually a little robot in there that makes the food. So you can kind of see, here are all the ingredients, and it spins around and it can combine things to make salads or like grain bowls, all these different things. So that's kind of cool. It's a little bit more multi-purpose.
Yeah, and those are just great ways to implement, the grab and go, and all the little bodega vending that we're really programming into a lot of our communities. So Fitwell, I'm sure many of you all have heard of or are familiar, maybe even considering this on some of your communities and projects. We did a little bit of digging to see currently how many communities are either in progress or completed with the Fitwell certifications. There's 137 multifamily communities. And I think that count was as of somewhere mid-February this year. So there's a lot. And I mean, it's gaining momentum rather quickly, which is exciting. Fitwell's there's two different really good prevailing wellness certifications for building. There's Fit Well and there's Well. We're going to talk about Well later on in the healthy space segment, but Fit Well in comparison is easier to achieve. It's drastically more affordable, like significantly more affordable, and it can be implemented retroactively in a building that wasn't specifically designed for a Fitwell certification. So it could be a piece that can be layered back in after the fact. It's a little bit easier to achieve, as I mentioned, but it's still awesome. It's really, really an exciting program. And I think, Shay, if you advance forward,
Yeah.
kind of the main key components to a Fitwell community. Again, whether or not you use this to sort of idea mine as to how you build and develop a healthy building and healthy space, or whether you actually go after the certification, I do think from a PR standpoint and a marketing perspective, this is an amazing sort of feather in the cap for your community if you really were going after kind of more of a sanctuary, well related or fit type community. Which I think is important across the board now. So the 7 key components for accreditation, and it kind of works like a point system, sort of like LEED does. Number 1 is community health. Number 2 is basically about life longevity. They call it morbidity and absenteeism, but it's basically life expectancy and longevity. 3 is social equity. 4 is feelings of well-being. 5 is access to healthy food, which some of those criteria don't apply to multifamily Fitwell, more to workspace and some other style buildings. And then 6 is occupant safety, and 7 is physical activity. So in general, these are all just great things. And so, it gives you a way to, ensure that these things are being indoctrinated, as you move through the design and development process. It's really an awesome program.
Thanks, Jen. So that takes us to healthy spaces. And this section will really look at how our built environment can be designed to optimize human health and performance. We have a little statistic here that workers in offices with biophilic elements report 15% higher levels of well-being.
So the next slide here is about indoor air quality, which is, a huge criteria when we're thinking about, healthy spaces. There's often a lot of conversation about how do we actually show in the built environment that the space is healthy, because you can't always see all these things that you quote unquote earn points for. And so we love the idea of having some, well-designed interior signage that puts people at ease and lets them know that the indoor air quality is awesome. There's a lot of different ways that you can do that through interior signage. We also did a little bit of research of late on some of the best mechanical systems for cleaning our air. And everybody, there's a lot of consensus in the marketplace that this needlepoint bipolar ionization NBPI is really one of the best systems for cleaning air. It's pretty awesome. And I think this is me as well, Shay, right?
I know you love talking about purified water. So
yeah, so water is super important. The human body is made of so much water. So having clean, purified, reverse osmosis water is super important. We love the idea of having these water taps, maybe at our hospitality station. So instead of having to necessarily serve coffee, we could be serving water. And some of these tap systems, do this, 3-part water where it can be ambient, room temperature, or chilled, or sparkling. It's just a really, really nice, healthy way to offer, nicely filtered, clean water to residents. And it can then also be tied into some, a branded swag sort of element for the community with like a really cool branded water bottle.
Thanks, Jen. So sort of keeping on our water train, we're going to talk about a faucet next. So we've actually been looking for a really good spec for a hands-free sensing faucet for a while. This is a bathroom faucet that we're showing here. And so we were also looking for one, specifically we wanted one that's matte black, but looking for any of these sort of really commercial grade sensing faucets was a challenge that we were facing. Ones that looked a little bit more design forward versus super kind of commercial and utility. So we love this Delta Proximity Gooseneck faucet. It is available in matte black, which, and I did speak to a Delta rep this year within 2021. They're looking to release more of these commercial grade, sort of more design led in the more designer colors and kind of and finishes this year. So look for more, but that are also this commercial grade and use this proximity technology to sense the user. And the proximity technology is actually their most kind of advanced sensing. So you're not going to get the little red laser. This one, it uses the tech that's similar to the one when you pick up your phone and it turns on because it sees your face and then it unlocks. So this is a great spec here that we really love and that we are using in our own purposes and our own office.
Next up is Walk Score. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Walk Score, but it's a third-party rating system that allows you to just plug in your address for your community, your project, and it tells you how walkable your site and location is. This is one of the largest point grabs for Fitwell and also Well. So both those building standards actually use Walk Score to base, how active and walkable your site and location is. So if you're hunting for sites to develop or build on, looking for sites that do have a high walk score rating, or working with them to get the walk score rating, revised or updated during the development process is super important. It's a great resource.
Thanks, Jen. Mm-hmm. So our next page here is about Xero Boc Paint. We were looking through, whenever we're looking through the standards, like Jen has been mentioning for Well or Fitwell, you always see low VOC, low VOC, low VOC, and we kind of haven't looked into it in a while. I don't want to admit it, but this is, we're all about transparency here. So I looked into low VOC to see what the new thing is, and apparently low VOC is out. Xero Boc is everywhere, and it's super accessible, which is really, really exciting. So we've highlighted a few options here, sort of the top 3 that we've researched, but this is something that is widely available and at really super reasonable price points. And like Jen said, you can get points for Fitwell and Well for using this Xero Boc paint.
And I think we are so excited because Promar 200 is such a standard builder grade spec that we've been using as a standard for a long time, and we didn't even realize that it was Xero Boc at this point. We thought it was just low VOC, so it's just very exciting, and the price points are coming down on all of these non-toxic coatings, which is really great.
It is exciting, and it takes a little bit of digging too, because you can see that this Bare Premium Plus, they don't even say it on the label, so it's really interesting, but it seems to be really kind of widespread throughout all of the paint companies at this point. So something else that we've been looking into is self-watering planters. We always talk about bringing greenery in, but we know that puts a strain on operations. So we're looking at ways to incorporate these self-watering planters. We found a solution from Turnasol, and they have this self-watering system that you can see here. It uses a vacuum sensing watering system that senses the moisture levels, and then it can allows for refill intervals up to 4 times longer than just the typical hand watering. And one great option that they have is these are just the liners here. So these can be sold separately, and you can use it to retrofit in your existing planter as long as the size is accommodating, or of course they have the full planter with the liner as well. So that's a great option here.
Okay, so next up is the Well certification. This really truly is an awesome, very, very smart program that it really focuses a little bit more on the core and shell of the building and design of the building, more so than Fitwell, as I mentioned before, whereas Fitwell is a little bit more about program and can be implemented after the fact. This really does have to be a decision early on in the design process. A lot of the point grabs are similar and fall in line with LEED. So there is some synergy there if you're already designing a LEED building. It's you're kind of already, part way there. We did a little research too to see how many multifamily communities in the US and Canada currently are well certified, and there's 34, which is up quite a bit from 2019, which is really exciting. And there's, just continues to be more and more interest in this. It's significantly more expensive than Fitwell because you get an administrator. When you apply and sign up, you have to actually pay for an administrator that helps you. But you also have somebody at your disposal that helps you and is very informed and can help you through the design process. So that's the main reason, the main driver for the cost program being more expensive. Also, in comparison to Fitwell, you have to continually recertify the space. Once you get certified, a certified well building, you don't just have it forever like you do with LEED and like you do with Fitwell. This is an ongoing certification because they want to come in and make sure that your indoor quality and all your building systems are still operating and running well and still producing a healthy, clean environment. So that's another kind of large contrast. But it's an amazing program. It really is. And so the key elements and values to the components, I should say, to the WELL certification program is about air quality, about water, nourishment. There's a lot of similar components to Fitwell with the nourishment, light, which Fitwell really doesn't go deeply into. Light is a really big one here with, circadian lighting, having a lot of natural windows, having operable windows is also a big way to get points. And then movement, which is in line with Fitwell. And then we've got thermal comfort, sound, materials, mind, and community, which I think is pretty awesome. There's some interesting criteria within community that I think is pretty exciting for multifamily. We could talk for 2 hours on WELL, but that's like the brief overview.
Awesome, thank you, Jen. Okay, well, we'll move into our green design section. So this section is about approaching building to minimize the impact on the environment. And our statistic here that we would love to share is that 75% of millennials are willing to pay extra for sustainable products. So this is something that we know is important to people.
All right, so the Living Building Challenge is sort of like LEED on steroids. It's sort of like the ultimate, green building criteria. It was launched in 2006. It's been around a while, but all the living buildings are pretty amazingly designed, and they really strive to. I think it says it somewhere in here. They don't use any more water or energy than it produces. So it really is a very, very low impact on the environment. But also the whole rating system is really pretty phenomenal. But it is definitely very, very aspirational, without a doubt. And here's all of the Living Building Challenge components. The first is all about place, water, energy, health and happiness, materials, equity, and beauty. And you see I'm sure you guys are seeing a lot of similarities between all three of these programs. And I guess the good news is that, if you're already, for example, going for a WELL certification, you're pretty close, or it gets you close to also doing Living Building Challenge. And same with if you're going for a LEED accredited building, you're already kind of part way for some of these. So it's just an additional, from a marketing perspective, feathering your cap, but also just adds, I believe, so much value long-term for the people who are living in these communities to really create, healthy, very healthy spaces, but also really, really good for the environment.
So one item spotlight we have here is Paracycle. They make collection boxes for items that are really difficult typically to recycle. And so when you go on their website, it's actually really fascinating. They have so many options for the type of box that can recycle the type of waste item that you're trying to dispose of. So for example, we got one for our office that's called the break room box. And that is a collection box that can take all of the little coffee pods, all your K-cups, any of those microwavable meals that have that sort of like that lining that means you can't recycle it. It can take plastic silverware, it can take straws, it can take all of that. It can take chip bags that have that like shiny lining. So any of those things that would normally go straight to the trash because you know that you can't recycle them, TerraCycle offers this service that can take care of recycling these difficult items. And so they have a ton of different ones. They have beauty products. They have, for all of those, you see the picture here, all of like those cosmetic bottles. So this is a really nice option for multifamily to have in sort of like that hospitality area, or another nice amenity could be to have one that collects those plastic grocery bags, any of those things that we all end up with, but we have no way to dispose of. So we love TerraCycle. It's really a great option.
And on the green design front, we wanted to, put a spotlight on mass timber construction, which uses, cross-laminated timber for the primary structural component of the buildings. We're seeing in the last, year, I'd say even in the last 6 months, more so, a lot of action in the marketplace around mass timber. We've been seeing a lot of projects popping up on our radar. We've been included in RFP processes for mass timber projects. There's just a lot of interest in it for 2 reasons. It really is seen certainly as a sustainable way to design and build because it uses rapidly renewable young trees in the construction of the timbers. So it's certainly a more renewable form of structure. And then also, I think what we love about it so much is that it creates, an aesthetic and an interior environment that just feels very biophilic and healthy with all of the natural wood. Some of these projects are really beautiful out there. I would encourage you guys to go and look at some of them a little bit more. I think we're spotlighting in the next slide a project that's being built actually in our original hometown of Cleveland, Ohio, called The Intro. It's supposedly going to be one of the tallest mass timber construction multifamily projects in the United States. I'm sure it'll be surpassed in the not too distant future. But really great community, pretty cool branding, pretty well done. We also know that Heinz is doing a lot with their T3 brand, which is their mass timber brand. There's a lot of just exciting pathways that they're taking with that brand that I encourage everybody to look at.
Jen, yeah, it's really cool. We got lost for a while researching that whole mass timber world. It was really fun. All right, so our next section here, authenticity. So this section is all about watching this sort of consumer trend that people are really gravitating toward thoughtful design that's aware of its place, tells a story. 80% of people want brands to tell stories. So one example that we have of a way that we love to tell stories in our projects is through the site history. So something that we run into from time to time is having lumber or trees on our property that need to be harvested. And we always try to find a way to reclaim this and engage within the design or with some sort of resident move-in gift, creating a cutting board or like a pizza peel, or working this reclaimed lumber or timber in through art. Like we love this beautiful image on the left that shows the rings of the trees, so that we're giving some sort of like homage to what was on the site previously.
And just kind of a micro concept that piggybacks on that is something we're doing on one of our projects where we're using the reclaimed wood to create frames for art, which would be a resident move-in gift. And what we like about this is that, it ties into the, of course, the authenticity piece and the local piece by using a local artist. We're commissioning them to create, 2, 3, or 4 different pieces of art, images, and residents then can choose which one they want for their move-in gift. So it just allows us to incorporate local artists as well as local materiality. And, another way to be very authentic is through the programming piece and engaging perhaps local artists to host art events and art classes. There are so many artists out there that are just, anxious to connect with their community and to help get their names out there. And they're willing to do these different events. And the sky's the limit with, all the different types of events that can be hosted. But, a lot of times we see our events hosted, by the leasing team or by a resident or by, Apartment Life, who is a great partner. But, they can be hosted by, a local artist. So we like this idea for authenticity.
I love this.
All right, so now we're into, those were the 6 conscious design values. And again, there's so much more that falls into each of those that, is in our full forecast. But now we're moving into the macro trends, kind of these big prevailing movements out there that are starting to influence us. And, one of the reasons we like to sort of look ahead, big picture at these macro movements is because it does help us to see ahead. And enduring design helps us to eliminate wasteful design by looking ahead as far as we can and anticipating those influential global and macro movements. Shay, sorry, this is you. Go ahead.
I was going to say, thanks for the macro intro, Jen. So our first macro movement concept that we are looking at is connected age. And so we're saying here, I don't think I have to tell any of us because we're all living through it, but 2020 has been the year maybe our virtual lives surpassed our lives lived in person. But as we move forward, we're really curious how we will find this balance in our super hyper-connected digital world. And so we have this quote here that we love and we're really inspired by from WGSN, that 2020 has been heralded as the dawn of the connected decade, which I think is a pretty powerful statement. So to bring us into that sort of connected mindset, we've looked a bit at this certification called Wired Score. And this certification it's a internationally available certification that really looks at your digital connectivity and the smart technology available within homes, offices, multifamily, et cetera. And so we're really keeping an eye on this and seeing if this certification sort of takes off, if we're seeing the value here, but we know how important being connected in every single space is and has become, especially in the last year.
And sort of on that note of, hyperconnectivity and the fact that we're in this very, very hyper-connected era, we're looking at how we can sort of be wired well and how we can have, moments of reprieve within our hyper-connected spaces. And so we're thinking, we could even have, phone-free zones, maybe even some micro offices that are sort of EMF-free zones where, you're actually plugging into a network connection or an internet connection versus, fully relying always on wireless. And just those quiet spaces. And again, it's not like it would have to be a separate design space. It would be, built into that environment, and that environment can be used for all different sorts of things. Micro office, a small conference, it could be a little meditation room, it could be, whatever you wish it to be or how you wish to program it. But we do think some of the phone free and, those disconnected spaces we think are important going forward.
Okay, so our next macro movement we're looking at is redefining home. We're really looking at how our homes have become like mini homesteads, one place where we're all eating, sleeping, working, studying, all along with all of our families. So we're looking at the implications of this on the future of multifamily specifically. And so the first page here looks at this flex zone. And this is something that we've talked a lot about, but we think that it's definitely important and definitely something that's long lasting. So we're saying here, create this flexible space that can accommodate all of these sort of homestead activities that we're all doing, school, work, working out, and just hanging out.
All right, and so co-living, we just want to shine a light on co-living here, because coming through this COVID era, people really have been very isolated and disconnected from other people, and the notion of having a roommate and having someone, for people who don't have a significant other or don't have a companion, co-living is really, really important. We also feel that, it sort of solves some of the, rising cost of living piece in our urban environments. And there's a lot of some great actual articles that we have in our resources here that you could read as well, which we'll show here at the end. But CBRE did a really great write-up, a recent write-up on co-living and how it is on the rise. And it does help to, you can even think about programming a community to help kind of mitigate the risk exposure of doing a fully, designed for co-living community by doing something that's, part co-living, part conventional. But, we think that this is important. So I think Shay also here has spotlighted a very well-designed co-living community.
Yeah, so we took a look at Star City Co-Living, and they're specifically focused right now in the Bay Area, which we know affordable living there is a challenge. So definitely a very strategic move there. And so they've expanded, they have 12 locations. And I think what really inspired us here is that we were looking at their Series B funding, which was last year in April, and really their response as well to COVID. And they were saying that co-living was sort of like totally powering through. They were still receiving funding, they were still receiving interest. And like Jen mentioned in the previous slide, it is such a way to live, knowing that you're still going to, kind of tying back to what we talked about in the beginning, but you're still going to have that human connection. So you have your own space, but you know that you're also part of the larger community. And we love the way that Star City sort of highlights that.
We also wanted to call attention to an organization out there called Conscious Co-Living, and it's just ironic. Our forecast focus is conscious design, and so we thought this was nice to call our attention to. They're an organization that is, helping to support co-living community spaces operators. And I love sort of their mission and purpose. They believe that co-living is part of the answer to solving the loneliness epidemic, overconsumption, and the environmental crisis. Conscious co-living envisions a future where people are consciously connected to self, others, and nature. So it's just a good organization to look into. Again, if you're just looking for, some research on co-living, if you're actually planning or thinking about a portion of your community or community based on co-living, I think this would be a great resource for you during that process.
Awesome. So our next section here under macro movements is old world skills. And this section was really inspired by what we saw last year with everybody getting into crafting or sewing, everyone and their mom baking bread, and gardening was also huge. I got into that one, and seeds were like back ordered. So we're really inspired by that sort of look back at the things that we used to do generations ago, and how we could bring this as sort of a trend that we see to be very long living and long lasting into our spaces.
And sort of on that front, we don't necessarily have to have a single use space that's only for, maker style activities. We can design a portion or entire co-work space to feel like what we're calling a creative co-work space. It creates a little bit more of a relaxed kind of roll your sleeves up type space that can be, creatively used for co-work, and for maker style and events. And so we just wanted to just call some attention to that. I think the other reason Shay and I wanted to talk about this too is that we've been talking about maker spaces, all of us, in the industry now for years and years and years. And I think sometimes we all think that things are sort of like worn out quickly, and that we're like looking for all the new ideas. But we think that this is still so incredibly important programmatically, and going forward even more so, because as Shay said, we've all picked up new hobbies. We've kind of gone back to some of those sort of essential activities, and so I think that this is a programming piece that is still and will be going forward incredibly relevant.
Our next section is return to travel, and this is really a response to what we're seeing as this sort of pent up demand for travel. Everybody with wanderlust, wanting to get out, and we've all been a little bit homebound the last year, so we're seeing that this return to the roads and skies, people will put more of a value on travel, because now it's a little bit novel and a little bit more precious, since it's something that was kind of on the back burner for a while. So we're looking at how this will affect our spaces. Perhaps we'll see a resurgence of this sort of like nomadic, eclectic design elements, and so we have a few further ways to explore that in the full version of the forecast. But for now, Jen's going to talk to us about home sharing.
Yeah, so this is no doubt a hot button topic with every developer that we talk to, because there are so many inherent issues and risks and concerns with opening up any portion of your community to a home sharing style platform. But there are some out there that have kind of paved the way, that are doing a good job of mitigating those issues. And again, going forward, this whole era of the last year has just all been about flexibility and kind of redefining how we live. And so the notion of having the freedom to choose whether you want to share your home so that you can afford to go take a vacation, we think has so much potential and so much appeal, that it's worth trying to figure this out as an industry of how we offer this going forward. We just see so much potential. We've listened to so many speakers. We've done so much research on it. There's so much here and so much untapped opportunity here. Again, we get the concerns. There's a lot of them, but if we can figure it out, I do think that there would be so much demand for it, truthfully.
We love it. Okay, so now we're looking here at outdoors in. We've all seen the importance of the indoor-outdoor connectivity over the past several years, but especially over the past year. People are seeking spaces to gather, and also sort of a renewed interest in interacting with nature.
And so, we're looking at this on all of our projects that are under design, is how we can sort of bring the outdoor open air spaces into our building. And so a lot of these, covered spaces, door systems that open up so we can connect with the outdoors. Operable windows is a big one. Operable windows is a big one to, help you earn points with both WELL and FitWell in the Living Building Challenge. Allowing fresh air in. I was just recently with one of our developers up in Nashville with Greystar, and they mentioned to us that they're so thankful they had some operable windows in a building they're developing right now, and so I think wherever we can bring the open air into our spaces and designing our spaces for that, thinking about all of the windows in our club and amenity spaces, not just the units, as being operable to allow us to kind of those fresh breeze come in of course the climates that it's conducive for, I think is very, very important. And it's not just it's not just open air, it's also about making the interior environment feel like it's kind of outdoors in. So a lot of those biophilic practices and principles with, live plants, natural materials, that all also just helps give you the sense of a fresh, clean, open air, outdoor inspired space. And sort of, in conclusion, I think we're going to get you guys off the phone here a few minutes early, which is always nice to get a few minutes back. Just in summary, we just want to say the pendulum has done a massive swing here in the last, year in response to COVID. And, you know, we always know that pendulums swing, you know, and ultimately hopefully find an equilibrium or a common middle ground. You know, we are going to be coming back together and, you know, and you know, getting back together as people and traveling and dancing and having concerts and all these like awesome resident events. That's all gonna come back. And so I think our biggest concern and what we just want to, you know, share is that, you know, in this short term period, we want to make sure that we're not compartmentalizing the bones of our spaces too much. Because, you know, again, long term, we think that, you know, people coming together and having those gathering spaces and the gathering tables and all those things that have been a little taboo here are going to be really important. It's not to say that we still don't need those smaller, more intimate spaces, you know, the small chat groups, the micro offices, the nooks, all those spaces you know, are so important for placemaking. But we also want to make sure that we have those larger assembly spaces, both interior and exterior, in our programs. And then we wanted to also just flash up quickly for those of you that like to do some nighttime reading. We've done, Shay has done a very nice job of sharing, of course, our methodology for our forecast research, which is always here in the tail end of our forecast. But we also have a couple pages of awesome references. We've tried to do the work of curating what we think are some of the best articles, some of the best resources out there. So you can, you know, this forecast is obviously all digital. I'm sure everybody on this call has it. So you can just, you know, click the link, do a little extra reading, do a little extra research, but all of these resources are incredibly helpful. And guys, that is it. That is a wrap. So we finished a few minutes early. Shay and I had talked about doing some kind of live Q&A. So, you know, we're happy to hang on the line here a few minutes if anybody wants to, you know, throw any questions up. But if anybody wants to drop, you're free to go. But if anybody also sends any questions that we don't get a chance or there's not enough time to answer, Shay and I intend to individually respond to all of those questions and send you an email response with any additional resources to help answer the questions that you have. So thank you all so much for attending. Like I said, it was so nice to see some of the names that are out there that joined us today. Wish we could all be together in person, but hopefully again that'll happen sometime in the not too distant future.
Thanks, everyone.